Hello, this film's about ethics in university research projects and what you need to know to make sure that you do your research in a responsible and ethical way. So, why do ethics matter in doing research in the first place? Well, doing ethical research is really about maintaining trust in your research findings, the way you've gone about doing your research, and making sure that, for example, if you've used a survey or you've asked people their views, that you've done that sort of thing in the right way. So, there's been some cases in the past where the public have not been able to trust the findings of researchers because of the way they did the research. So, also, it's about protecting the research participants, the people you ask to complete a survey or you've interviewed or have taken part in a focus group. So, protecting their rights and their well being as well, and ensuring that you have research outcomes, the results of your research, the conclusions that you make, and any recommendations that follow on are credible and you maintain the integrity of your work. And of course, there's professional standards and accountability. Your research needs to be transparent, and so people can understand very clearly about what you've done. And what you've done is up to the current professional standards of being a researcher. So, what are the guiding principles for doing ethical research? Well, firstly, it's about respect for other people. So, for example, if you want to do a survey, you send out questionnaires to a group of people, you need to obtain their consent, and not just their consent, but informed consent to make sure that those people understand what your questions are for, why you're asking those sort of questions, and what you're going to do with the answers that they provide you. So you've got to think carefully, especially if your research involves any vulnerable populations of people. So you have to think about how you are going to protect those vulnerable populations, those at risk groups of people. Think about, for example, if you ask a worker in a company what they think about their boss. Well, you want them to tell you the truth. And if the truth is slightly negative towards their boss, how would their boss feel if they were to find out what the workers said about them? And what reaction would there be? Could that worker lose their job, for example? So, respect for people means protecting that vulnerable population or populations that you're using, but it also means respecting the participants' autonomy and privacy. They have that right for privacy of their information and data that they give you. And it also means maximizing the potential benefits of doing research whilst minimizing any negative risks and ensuring that the research has a positive impact rather than a negative impact to you and society at large, and especially the community that are involved in your research. And making sure that you treat the participants of your research in a fair and equitable way. You don't bias, for example, one group over another. You're not going to exploit them or discriminate in any way, whether you mean to or perhaps you haven't really thought about it, and that sort of discrimination creeps into your research, almost by random, if you like. So, how do you integrate the ethics into what you're planning to do for your research? It's really important to think about when you plan your research how to do it in an ethical way. So, start by thinking about things like how you're going to get informed consent. So, you can do this by, for example, clearly explaining the research purpose, outlining the procedures of your research. What are you going to do? How are you going to collect data from people, for example? What are you going to do with their answers? What sort of questions are you going to ask them? How are you going to store that data? How long are you going to keep that data, and how are you going to use that data? And think about any potential risks and the benefits of those risks. And then obtain voluntary and informed consent from all participants. Think about data privacy and keeping that data confidential. So you need to put into place a data protection measure or measures. So, for example, keeping responses anonymous. Don't name people that have given you especially sensitive information, and make sure that you keep that data secure in its storage systems. Perhaps you need to obtain necessary approvals for that data collection and use. So, for example, if you want to ask workers in a company about their work or the company's behavior, for example, you will need to get approval from that company to ask those people to give their time and to give you the information that you're asking. What about potential harms? Are there any risks of potential harms to people in any way, shape, or form? That could be physical, that could be psychological, and that could be social risks. So identify any potential risks and, importantly, mitigate, reduce those risks. Try and avoid those risks from happening in the first place. And if you can't completely avoid them, how are you going to minimize them? So then, as you go throughout the research process, try to maintain the integrity. So, for example, making sure that the data you collect is accurate and reliable. You analyze it accurately and you analyze it transparently so people understand what you've done with that data to come to the results and conclusions that you make. So, things like avoiding bias. So try and think about your own personal biases and any biases that could skew the results before you set out and collect that data. So recognizing and addressing those potential biases in how you've designed your research, for example, the questions that you're going to ask, the methods that you use, for example, sending an electronic survey through an app, that biases people can only answer it if they're using that app, for example. What about your data collection techniques? How you conduct interviews, for example. Things like your body language, how you phrase and emphasize words when you're asking questions, and also how you analyze that data once you've received it. So you've got to try and ensure that you're objective and impartial when you're analyzing your research findings. And you need to protect the data that you collect from any sort of manipulation or falsification, either by you or by anybody that's collecting that data on your behalf. You don't want people to censor the data, for example, that they pass on to you. So how you maintain accurate records and documentation is really, really important. How you then communicate your research findings has an impact on how you're working and whether you're working ethically. So you need to report your work in an accurate and transparent way. So that means presenting your research findings honestly and accurately, and thinking and disclosing about any limitations or biases that could possibly be in that data and in those results. Things like plagiarism and research misconduct, obviously a big no-no in research work. So you need to make sure that you're citing and referencing your sources properly and giving credit to other people's work that is helping you do your work, and making sure that you adhere to and keep to any ethical guidelines when you're writing your research results, be it in a thesis, a dissertation report, or a journal article, or a conference presentation. Think carefully about the ethical implications of sharing your data if you're writing for an open access journal paper, for example, and stick to that relevant data sharing policies and agreements that you've agreed with your research participants, perhaps with the university or research body that you're working for or you're a student thereof. So think about any institutional review boards or ethical reviews that have to take place. Usually, you're a student at a university, the university will have protocols and policies about how to do your research work ethically. Make sure that you understand what the policies are for the university you're a student studying at, and prepare and submit any ethical review applications that you need to, and address any concerns that are raised by that institutional ethical review board. So, finally, ethics and ethical considerations are really important to give trust to your research and the process of doing research, and adhering to the ethical principles is really important for the integrity and value of your research and upholding those professional standards that we all work towards. And, you know, personally, by doing continuous reflection as you work through your research, think about what are the ethical issues surrounding what I am proposing to do. Can I get rid of those risks in the first place? And if I can't, how am I going to reduce those risks to the barest minimum? And that's really being an ethically responsible researcher. Well, I hope you've liked this film. If you have, give me a thumbs up, drop some comments in the comments box, give me some ideas for other films that can help you do research and studies at university. And please subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much for watching. Bye now.